Is anyone counting?
No, I thought you were.
No, right? How are we going to know?
You're live now.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for helping assist us today. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Diane Sandler, Director of External Affairs at CalSTRS. And joining as a co-host is Kim Petz. Kim is one of our assistant directors at Member Account Services. And so going forward, she and I will continue to co-host and collaborate on this quarterly conversation. So Kim, I don't know if you want to say hello to everybody and then
we'll get started.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Diane. As Diane mentioned, I'm one of the assistant directors in Member Account Services. I've actually been in Member Account Services now as assistant director for the last 6 years. And so I've worked with a lot of you throughout the years. I wanted to just say, first, welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us in this first ever completely remote EAC meeting. I think a lot of you probably already know this, as you've likely been in contact with your employer services representatives, but we in Member Account Services, like the rest of CalSTRS, are conducting our business remotely. We are here for assistance. Our employer helpline is up and running. All of your employer services representatives are available to you, just like they always are. We've been conducting webinars. The biggest change for us, I think, as you will know, is we're not doing in-person training. But we've conducted training with a lot of you over the last couple of months already. One of the things we wanted to do before we really get started is talk about the question and the interactive part of this meeting. For those of you who've attended the EAC remotely with us in the past, your method for asking questions is the same. And for those of you that normally attend in person, if you look at the agenda, there's an email address for you that you can send your questions into, and we will have some time set aside at the end of the meeting for some Q&A. Please remember that given our unique situation in doing this meeting this way, try to keep your questions to things that are generalizable to the rest of the employer population. If it's something that is very unique in how you're conducting your business, I would ask that you take those questions offline. And if we need to, if we run out of time at the end, we will put out an FAQ document if we start to see a lot of questions with a similar vein. And one other thing I wanted to mention to you all, this is the time of year when most of you as employers would be seeing the Member Account Services Employer Survey. And that survey is tied to some strategic goals for us that we take on in the coming year with your responses. Given the nature of everything right now, we are going to postpone that survey till June. That is our current plan, is June. So if you have any questions about that survey, you can definitely pop those into your email also. So I think without further ado, we will turn things over to Joycelyn Martinez-Wade, who you are all familiar with, for our legislative update.
Thank you, Kim. Well, it's good to be with everyone. I'm sorry we're not in person. I missed that interaction, but I definitely wanted to provide a regulatory and legislative update. And as you have questions, please use the email to send them in. I'll pause a couple times to check in with folks who are monitoring that inbox to see if there's anything that I can answer in the middle of my presentation, or if they don't come in until after I'm done, then I'm happy to answer them in the Q&A portion. Just quickly on regulations, we have started the public comment regulations process by the board asking us to initiate the rulemaking process. And this is for public comment at board meetings. So if any of you ever attend those, this would impact that interaction with our board. We have postponed submitting those to the Office of Administrative Law, so the formal process hasn't begun yet. But we'll keep, if you want to know about that, then it get added to our regulatory mailing list. And that way you can see the updates on that item and when it gets noticed, and if you did want to provide comments on it. And that's regulations@calstrs.com. And that's for any regulatory updates. So it's a good announcement, is regulations@calstrs.com is how you can get in touch with us and be added to those lists. One that you may be more interested in are regulations affecting the appeals process when there's been an audit. In March, So it was the last board meeting that we had in person. The board did ask us to begin working on drafting regulations so that the systemic and the audit, the sample population would be treated the same if there were appeals that were taken on after an audit came out. And so we have an internal working group that's working on language for that. And once that has been vetted, then we'll be sharing with our stakeholders. And so we want to get feedback on that. So it's kind of some pre-formal rulemaking process work that happens where we try to get feedback ahead of time so we can take that into account before we do take it to the board and they give us guidance to start that formal rulemaking process with the OAL. So that's the regulations front. And I'm going to go through the matrix and then I'll stop for questions. So this is the legislative front. And actually, I'll give you an update on what's up at the Capitol. And you may have heard some of that from CalPERS this morning. But the Assembly came back to the Capitol last week. The Senate is back this week. They are having policy committee hearings. They do have different policies on which bills they want heard in their committees. And so the Senate is kind of taking a more hardline approach where they want bills to be focused on COVID-19 and issues related to the pandemic. They've asked senators to strip down their bill packages, and what I've heard is to 2 bills each. Not quite sure if that holds in all cases, but that is going to be reflected in some of the updates I give you on the bills and the matrix, which again is one of the documents that was provided as part of the materials that's posted online. And the Assembly, it's kind of up to the committees. So the Speaker has allowed the committees to have their own criteria for what is an essential bill at this moment. And so, for example, the Retirement Committee that many of our bills move through, Assembly Public Employment and Retirement Committee, they just asked that people consider whether there was an essential problem or issue that should be solved at this point in time, what the costs of the bill are, and whether or not a referendum would be required in the future. So vote of the people and kind of thinking of that impact. And several bills were heard in our committee. And so there's probably lots across the different committees. I'm not sure exactly what will happen once those bills, if they make it out of the first committee, once they get to appropriations, and then once they get to the Senate, there could be a different approach since the Senate, again, has that more narrow focus. So things have gotten up and running, just some color commentary. They are allowing testimony to be provided in person in the room. They're using the larger room, socially distancing the members of the committees and the public who's attending and any staff that's there. So that's pretty limited. They are providing opportunities for testimony via video conference, like a Zoom platform from somewhere else in the Capitol building. And then you can call in and use the phone line. So it's pretty orchestrated. It seems to be running fairly smoothly at this point in time. Other committees started actually before last week on budget issues. So I'm sure those are top of mind. And we're anticipating that the May revise will be out this Thursday. And so we'll know a lot more about what's going to happen on that front for education budgets and CalSTRS and all the other pieces of the budget, health and corrections and all the other big hitters once that's released. So I think this term sounds optimistic, but we're looking forward to seeing that so that we know what's going to happen in the upcoming year. As you know, the deadline for submitting income taxes has been moved out to July. And so generally the May revise takes into account all the tax returns from April. And so they may have to look again at the budget in August once they've seen the income taxes that come in from July. And so this could be kind of a protracted process this year. It'll operate probably a little bit differently, like everything else kind of at this point. But then to that matrix that I mentioned that, again, is posted online and would normally be part of your packet, I'm going to focus on just a few bills. AB 2219 is one of our sponsored bills on the CalSTRS IRA and providing that as an investment option to school employees that want to use it in addition to anything else they're using as savings vehicles. So that bill did move out of the Assembly Public Employment and Retirement Committee last week. And so it's on its way to Assembly Appropriations, which is the Fiscal Committee. And they should be having their hearing the last week of May, the first week of June. And so we'll see what happens to that bill at that point in time. AB 2510 is one of our other sponsored bills on investment procurement. And that bill is actually one that is not moving forward because of the focus on COVID-19 related legislation. And so that's going to sit there. We plan to work on it next year again. One bill that popped up, it was amended May 4th, is AB 2998, and that would allow a school district to offer a defined contribution plan. And if certificated employees join that defined contribution plan, they would be excluded from the CalSTRS defined benefit program. So that bill, our board did take an opposed position on that bill. It was meant to be heard last week, but it got pulled from the agenda. So it is also not moving forward this year. And last but not least, our housekeeping bill, SB 993, is a Senate bill. And so that bill I do not anticipate moving forward either because of the focus on pandemic-related legislation. So if that's the case, we will tackle it again next year. As you've seen with your materials and what's posted online, the other document I provided was amendments to that bill that we would look to insert either if it does happen to move forward this year or to include in an introduced version next year. I do want to go through those with you. We will be very early and prepared for next year if that's the case, but I just want to make sure you see them, you have them. If you have any questions, you get to ask them. But I'm going to pause for a minute, check in with our folks here to see if anyone has emailed in a question thus far.
Nope, no emails yet.
Great. So no questions yet. I'm going to move on to the draft amendments for SB 993. This is a Word document that got sent out. You can see things in italics and bolded and underlined and struck through and highlighted in yellow. And so this is normally the format we give you draft language in. And I want to start at the top. So page 1, this is section 22119.5, the Education Code definition of credible service. The amendments we're looking at kind of change how the language is around the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, the CTC, and their certification qualifications. So we're looking at service performed at a pre-kindergarten through grade 12 employer in a position with certification qualifications authorized by the CTC. And basically, we want to reflect the fact that the CTC has a practice of not only issuing credentials and certificates, licenses, but of authorizing employers to determine certification qualifications for certain positions. So they may leave it to you, and they do have guidance on this, but they may leave it to you to determine what other licenses may apply. And so we just want to make sure that however the member is certified for their field, then we're looking at credible service for that. It's the first amendment. And then scrolling to page 2, and the amendment is in the middle of the page, and this is section 24204 of the Education Code. And this has to do with service retirements. And if a member has submitted their application and they want to change or cancel it, they can do that. And we want to just be clear that if they're canceling it and they've received any benefit, current law is that they have to return their service retirement benefit, and then they can go on and work or whatever their plan was after canceling their service retirement. We also want to be clear on that front that if they got a lump sum for their defined benefit supplement payment and they want to change that to an annuity, we need to get that lump sum back. It needs to be returned to CalSTRS in order to start paying the annuity. So there's funds to support that annuity going forward. So we just want to be clear that we're also talking about that lump sum payment. And that first section on page 2 is for the DBS program. And then there's a similar change in 26804 of the Education Code for the cash balance benefit program. So kind of the same amendments you'll see start at the very bottom of page 2 and then go on to page 3. And again, we need to just see that lump sum returned, or else there's no funds on which to draw the annuity going forward if that's what the member or participant has chosen to receive instead of a lump sum. Now, the next 2 changes or sets of amendments, and that's in Education Codes section 26808 and 26810, kind of are partnered together. This is, again, cash balance changes. In section 26808, the first one you'll see is just a changing of terminology. So it's when someone terminates their benefit that they have under cash balance, then we want to make sure of the date that they're using to calculate what the balance is in the account. So it's the employer can see. The portion of the annuity derived from the amounts credited to the employee account and employer account as of the date the participant terminates the annuity. And it used to say of reemployment, and it's not certain that somebody would be reemployed necessarily, but they are terminating their annuity. This reflects some language that was in 26810 that is redundant of 26808. So we're just truing up the language, if you will, in 26808, and you'll see as we scroll down to 26810, it's actually at the very bottom of page 3, that subdivision C is being struck out. And so the bottom of page 3, top of page 4. So that subdivision is redundant with 26808. So we're striking it out here. And then it's only going to be one place in our statute in 26808. The other changes in 26810 is have to do with the termination of annuity under cash balance. So we're adding specifics around that and kind of changing them up to match up with the needs for that kind of process. And one thing that was left out is that if somebody wants to terminate their annuity, they may want to cancel or change that decision to terminate. So we have some language there in subdivision B that reflects how one would do that in the defined benefit program, and basically gives direction, like I said, if they want to cancel or change a termination request for a cash balance annuity. Again, just putting specific parameters around it so our members know what to do if they are making any of these decisions. And that's basically it. So they're a very straightforward set of amendments. I definitely wanted to get them out in front of you to see if there are any questions. And again, if you don't have any today and you think of them later, please get in touch. Happy to answer them. We can go through this in more detail. And again, we don't quite know the timing. I'm anticipating that these will be incorporated into a housekeeping bill next year, that you'll see all the changes from SB 993. But maybe there's a small chance that they'll decide to move other bills this year, but we're looking forward to seeing how that goes. And that's all I had on that front. So any questions come through on that? Okay. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. So I'll hand it over to John Hammond.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Hi, good afternoon. I'm John Hammond with the Employer Readiness Team, and I have a pension solution update for you. Again, if you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to go ahead and email those in, and we'll address those right away. Next slide. We want to thank you for your patience and flexibility as we navigate these unprecedented times together. We really do appreciate your patience, and just so that you know, we are here to support you and all your pension solution questions and needs and support. Please email us, and we'd love to help you. The good news is that the project is still on schedule. However, we are adopting our employer readiness approach to ensure that you receive the support you need to successfully transition into the new secure employer website that will be implemented in fall of 2021. We are now converting our scheduled in-person readiness visits to virtual visits, which are essentially like a webinar. It's a webinar specific for you and how to use and test the new system. We are working closely with your payroll software vendors as well to understand their new file format rollout schedules, and we'll reach out to you to schedule your virtual visit if we haven't already done so. So we are hopeful that the circumstances will change and that we'll be able to offer the in-person readiness visits again sometime in fall. But for this summer, we're really looking at virtual webinar style type of readiness visits with you. Next slide. The employer readiness environment is currently unavailable for file testing due to disaster recovery testing, which will last until May 26th. And so for those who are currently file testing in the employer readiness environment, you can reach out to the employer readiness team, and if you need assistance, and we could help you continue the test during this time if you would like to do that. So you would just need to let us know. So next slide. I also would like to remind you about the training opportunities available now that we have available and in the future. There are about 24 computer-based training opportunities available now in PALMS, and PALMS stands for the Pension Administration Learning Management System and can be accessed through the Employer Support Portal. Also through the Employer Support Portal, you can find job aids and technical tools, FAQs, and a lot of other helpful information. Finally, we're developing our training plan and we'll be sharing the details of our interactive training opportunities at future EACs. Next slide. Although we are working from home, we still are available to support you. So please reach out to the employee readiness team if you need any assistance. On this slide, you see the Employer Support Portal website URL for your convenience. We have a lot of great information there on the project, pension solution, testing, technical documentation that you can take advantage of. Here's also the Employee Readiness Team email for when you're ready to schedule your visits with us. And for the report sources out there, please contact your employer services representative for any testing support that you need. So thank you so much for your time today, and continue to be safe out there. If any of you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain them if any have come in.
Nope, no questions.
Okay. Well, thanks again, and please don't hesitate to email us if you have any questions. Next on the agenda is Cheryl Diaz with the Compliance and Ethics Hotline. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share with you about CalSTRS Compliance and Ethics Hotline. So we implemented an anonymous reporting hotline that replaces and expands a few existing systems into one comprehensive and confidential tool that supports our stakeholders in speaking up on any compliance and ethical concerns. You might need to click one more time to come up with a graphic. There you go. So we decided to implement the hotline in 2 phases. We launched within the organization in February, and we plan to launch to external stakeholders in June 2020. You can go to the next slide. Okay. Thanks. Whoops, I think, oh, there we go. All right, so the implementation of this hotline is supported by best practice, and it aligns to CalSTRS' mission. That is to sustain that trust of our members. It also is supported by a CalSTRS Code of Ethics and Business Conduct and demonstrates our commitment to our core values, such as leadership, accountability, trust, and respect. The next slide. All right, you might have to click one more time. There you go. So we began implementation of the hotline by engaging a third party, Navex, to provide hotline reporting services. So Navex is a global leader in compliance and ethics workspace, and they provide services to most of the Fortune 100 companies and some of our pension peers. So in partnership with Navex, CalSTRS provides stakeholders an opportunity to report through the toll-free number or web intake. Our phone intake is staffed with dedicated and trained customer service representatives from Navex that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned that this is a view of the current pension abuse hotline. So we consolidated the hotline into that one hotline. So this is folded into our compliance and ethics hotline. So this form will no longer be viewable. But the advantage of this is that you have more accessibility. So prior for pension abuse reporting, it was during business hours. But now, like I said earlier, you can do 24 hours a day. Also, we've increased our reporting categories. Prior, it was basically limited to pension abuse, but now you can report on any compliance and ethics concerns. Next slide. Yep, there you go. So this is basically in June, we'll have a link on CalSTRS.com, and it will direct you and take you to the hotline homepage, which is what you see right now. You can call the toll-free number or click on the highlighted area that says make a report. The customer service rep or the web intake will walk you through a series of questions. What's most important to note is that you will need to create a password And when you submit the report, it will provide you a report key. So why that's important is because this is an anonymous hotline. So the way that we communicate with you is through the system. Now, you don't have to report anonymously. You're able to put your information if you'd like to. But again, we still want to communicate through the system. So underneath the make a report is an opportunity to say follow up on a report. And that's where you can check on your status of your report, or we may have a question or request additional documentation, and we'll do it through that mode. Okay, next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, there's more than just pension abuse for compliance and ethics. We have 9 categories for reporters to choose from. And next to each category is a details area where you can click on that and it'll give you a flavor for what items are typically reported under that category. So this is the first screen or request that will be made when a reporter selects to make a report. They'll need to select a category. And this is allowing CalSTRS to direct that concern to the appropriate party. Next slide. For this one, you might need it. Yeah, there you go. So when you're on our compliance homepage, you'll be able to see some links that are on the side. One of the helpful links is our awareness brochure. And that awareness brochure gives a general overview of the process and why make a report and how that process works. We also included a link to CalSTRS Code of Ethics and Business Conduct. And lastly, we also provided frequently asked questions. So if you had additional questions, you could probably find them in that frequently asked questions documentation. Okay, next slide. So one more slide, sorry. All right. So the hotline is a mechanism for CalSTRS to formally intake reports to assign, manage, and resolve cases. So the first thing is when a report is issued, our CalSTRS legal, ethics, and accountability attorney will review the report and assign the case to the appropriate party. Now, our resolution process has not changed. So if the report is on pension abuse, that will go to our Member Account Services Compensation Review Unit. So this is really an opportunity for all our stakeholders to express any ethical or compliance concerns, and for CalSTRS to take that opportunity to learn and act. We're able to provide, and thus over time we'll get broader insight into improvements for compliance through that data analysis and the trend analysis that we believe will lead us to remediate any compliance risks through improved communication, clarifying policy, or improving controls. Next slide. So the reporting process is really intuitive and user-friendly, but because we won't launch this for external stakeholders until June, we included a link that will take you to the NAVEX catalog of education, and there's an on-demand reporter training you can click on, and it'll walk you through the reporting process. Next slide. So essentially, the Compliance and Ethics Hotline is really to encourage not only our staff, but external stakeholders to speak up. We value our member trust, and we want to continue to demonstrate that we care about compliance and ethics. So we want to provide those services that we provide to our members and our employers in a compliant and ethical manner. Happy to answer any questions you have.
No questions at the moment.
Okay. So if there are no questions, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Kim and Diane for the open forum.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Cheryl.
So we have gotten through our agenda more quickly, I think, than we had anticipated, which leaves us a good chunk of time for some Q&A. So if there have been any questions that have come through that weren't about the presentations or came through after a presentation, we'd love to take those now.
And while folks may be submitting questions, I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind folks that are viewing that, we don't know how long we're going to be doing this, what the social distancing requirements are going to ultimately mean for how we modify and change our format and layout for hosting this quarterly conversation. So as we look forward, we really would appreciate hearing from you what would be a good time time of day, the length of this conversation or dialogue. It's really difficult to be, sitting in a Zoom meeting or sitting on a webinar for 3 hours. So we've tried to really stream and strip this agenda down to what we feel is the core essentials, just so that we can maximize everybody's time and not add to some other stresses and lose focus. I know for me it's hard, really sometimes hard to maintain focus for long periods of time on these conversations and platforms. But if there are breakout sessions of specific areas or topics that would be helpful, that would definitely be feedback that we would like to hear to figure out how can we fold that into the future conversations. If there are, again, specific topics that we could spend more time on, also would be really valuable. I'm sorry, Kim?
I was just going to say, we definitely want to make sure that this time is used in a valuable way for you, that you're getting something out of the time that you spend with us, whether it's in person or virtually like this.
Absolutely. So that's definitely feedback that we would appreciate, so that, again, we can make this as helpful and as interactive as possible. Is Zoom a preferred format, or would WebEx or some type of a webinar format be better? We obviously are doing this Zoom conversation and then live streaming it, but would we have the ability, or would there be interest in bringing others into a larger Zoom meeting? I think Kim and I are open to, again, whatever changes or accommodations we need to make, that, again, creates a valuable resource and opportunity for you to reach CalSTRS staff and subject matter experts as you have questions or need information.
So one of the questions that just came through to me is, when CalSTRS issues a circular for contribution rates, will it also include estimates for future employer contribution rates? I'm going to ask Joycelyn to jump in on that, but I don't believe that we're able at this point to put what it might be in the future, that's an annual process.
Correct. The employer directive just states what the rate will be in the coming year, so July 1, 2020. Future years where the board will have some say in it. Those are projections, and so they're not included in the directive.
Thank you, Joycelyn. And then we have another question about adding days into the year, and I've sent that off to one of our SMEs, Samantha Kessner. Samantha, I'm going to see if maybe you're able to answer that and read the question for our viewers here.
Sure. You want me to read the question?
I can read it if you want, and then you can provide an answer. So the first part of the question talks about building emergency days into the work calendar. With the need to build emergency days into the work calendar, could LEAs that normally do not have work days in June build the emergency days in June and pay the employees August through June? Could we then continue to pay the employees in June, even in a year with no actual work days in June? Just want to make sure we are compliant for our 2% at 62 members who are required to be paid each pay period in which creditable service is being performed for that position.
Okay, so unfortunately, we haven't done anything to change the law. So for that 2% of 62 members, they do need to be paid in every pay period in which the service is performed. So that would probably be an issue for that group of people. The 2% at 60 though don't have that requirement. So we'd have to obviously look at these things as they come in. Specific examples are always welcome, but so far there's nothing that has changed in the law that would allow us to make exceptions for that kind of thing.
And then I believe that the second part of that question is actually just a statement about bringing things into compliance. So I think we're good with your answer there. Thank you.
Happy to help.
I have another question that says, have there been any special comp issues related to COVID coming up for teachers? And I'm not sure if you're asking about special compensation as it is reported to CalSTRS, or if you're just asking, have there been any special issues related to COVID? So if you could clarify what you're asking, if this doesn't answer it. The only thing that we have really seen in terms of special issues have been the additional leave that's been granted that some people have taken and how to report that. And I think that we've done a pretty thorough job of answering those questions about the leave. So if you have questions about that specifically, you can connect with your employer services representative. But as a general rule, I will say that if you are paying your teachers as they would always have been paid, whether or not this had happened, so they're still getting their full salary, nothing has changed, then you would report it to us unchanged as well. But again, that's a very generalized statement. So if you have a specific scenario, please connect with your employer services representative. I'm still looking to see if we have questions. Oh, and yeah, there was a question about using DocuSign or electronic signatures. And as Joycelyn had mentioned, that's a legislative proposal that is still sort of in the works. I will say during this time, Member Account Services has essentially gone to accepting employer forms without wet signatures. Again, if you have a specific form that you're concerned about, Member Account Services will be able to help you with that. But we have been accepting forms with additional certification that the form has been signed by the person it was supposed to be signed by. But yes, we are in a temporary situation accepting forms without wet signatures currently, whether that's DocuSign or just certification via email right now. I don't have any additional questions that have come my way.
And I'm not seeing questions coming my way either.
I have a couple here that just came in regarding furlough days. And one was, is CalSTRS planning on publishing an updated circular or directive related to potential furlough pay due to budget cuts?
So I can address that a little bit. The sort of short answer on furloughs is it really depends on how the district is going to be handling those furloughs. If, for example, a district is going to take that furlough and reduce everybody's earnable, then that's going to have one impact versus keeping everybody's earnable the same and furloughing everybody by reporting only what they're paying. So there's two potential main impacts. One, to final compensation for teachers at the end of their career, and also to service credit, again, depending on how it's dealt with. So it is really dependent upon how a district decides to handle that. And so I would definitely ask you to contact your employer services representative to talk about the specifics of what you might be looking at. Any other questions? And of course, if we have, if we know that furloughs are going to be something that's widespread, we will definitely issue a circular when we get to that point, but we're not there yet. Nothing else coming through? Okay, so Samantha, I'm going to call on you here real quick. I'm going to read this one out. Wondering if other organizations are paying special stipends for preparing for distance learning or telecommuting setup that are specific to COVID. Are these types of stipends creditable? Samantha, do you want to address that one?
We'd have to take a look at specifics. So I can't give you a blanket statement, but if it's for an additional work or if it's for hazard pay, those types of things, yes, would be creditable. Most likely, again, every situation is different and we want to look at the specifics in the contract or the agreement. But as long as it's for a creditable service or if it's for remuneration in addition to salary, special compensation that meets the regulations, then yes, those would be creditable things. The normal laws will apply. There's nothing special, nothing different from the normal laws at this time.
Right. There's nothing legislatively or in the TRL that would call out this specifically any different than any other additional compensation. Let me see if I have any other questions coming through. I think. Here's another one, Sam, and I think I can answer this one, but I want you to jump in if I'm wrong. The question is, we've had several questions about whether teachers taking training for online teaching or working to get their class online is creditable to CalSTRS. I think the working to get your class online would have to be a little bit more defined in terms of, if there's additional service involved in that. As far as taking training, I think we've clarified that taking training is not creditable. It is when someone is delivering training. Samantha, do you want to clarify on that?
Sure. So just, again, every situation is different, but taking training by itself is not creditable. It's not one of the creditable services listed in 22119.5. But if it's directly related to your work as a teacher or your work as a counselor, those types of things we can again take a look at and may be creditable. So if it's a mandatory training that is directly related to your work as a teacher, things like that, that would be. If it's just sort of open, here's an extra incentive for you to go and, keep learning or, go take any training you would like, something like that, something that's more vague, then that probably would not be creditable.
Thank you, Sam. That's the last of what I've seen come across for me. For those that are monitoring our box, any more coming through?
Yeah, Kim, you seem to be getting emails a little bit faster than me.
Oh, now we've got a hazard pay one. Hold on. Is hazard pay for STRS members during the pandemic based on the type of work being performed creditable compensation? Can you provide the code that describes that? Samantha, I think you mentioned hazard pay. I don't know if you happen to have that citation handy.
I do. Yeah, it's actually in the regulations. So it's the California Code of Regulations. It's section 27401, and it's what lays out remuneration that is paid in addition to salary. And so for one of the things is hazard pay, employment in a position that is hazardous or difficult to staff. So there's no further clarification on what that means, unfortunately, so we can't give you a black and white. But if you believe that you're, making payments to employees because the position that they're working right now is really hazardous because of the virus, then I would think that we would accept that. Again, it's, very nuanced. So make sure you check in with your representatives.
And then we just got another one about payments for phone and internet reimbursements. Those would not be creditable to CalSTRS. If you're reimbursing for a bill, you're asking for proof of expenditure, that kind of thing. Those things are not creditable to CalSTRS. And we did see a suggestion come through. I know Diane mentioned that we're looking for your feedback on how to make this better for you. One of the suggestions came through that using the chat function in Zoom is helpful. We'll definitely look at some of the options in making these meetings more interactive for you. As Diane mentioned, one of the things that we're talking about is smaller breakout sessions for things that are more specific to something you might be interested in. It's something that we were talking about with respect to having the meeting in person as well as doing smaller breakout sessions as well. So please continue to send in suggestions. If there are things that are working potentially maybe at your district when you've been holding large meetings that you think would work for something like this, we'd love to hear them.
Absolutely. I mean, and if there are large meetings that are happening at your districts and you would like to invite CalSTRS to attend or participate, please feel free to do so. Again, we are here to be helpful. We are here to answer questions and be a resource to you and to your teachers and educators. So reach out to us as opportunities come up, and to the extent we can, we would love to be a participant and be there to provide support, whatever that means and whatever that looks like. You know, speaking of employees and staff, you know, customer service, our customer service line continues to open and answer phones. We've reduced the hours slightly, so it's an 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. But again, they're still answering calls. Retirement applications, we are still continuing to accept retirement applications. Obviously, getting close to the end of the school year, that's a high peak season, and we are fully staffed to do that. And as Kim has previously mentioned, workshops and different types of one-on-one sessions continue to occur in a different format, but again, they continue to be there. So to the extent that your employees have questions about their CalSTRS retirement, please feel free to direct those to our customer service folks or our retirement readiness team, because they are also here for you, just like our staff and member account services.
So I haven't seen any more questions come through, and we want to be respectful of your time. So if we haven't addressed something that you want to have addressed, please feel free to send it via email, and we will do our best to make sure that the right person answers it. Again, if you have questions related to reporting or issues with dealing with getting your reporting or the money in on time, please reach out to your employer services representative, and we will do our very best. I did just get one more question in. Two. Let's see. The question says, what about giving a one-time stipend for stay-home shelter in place? I'm gonna ask Samantha to jump in on that. I'm going to say probably not, but again, I think it would depend on how it's characterized and what it's specifically for.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Kim. Usually a one-time stipend, especially if you're talking about a 2% at 62 member, not be creditable. If it's a 2% at 60 member, you know, potentially, but we'd have to, again, get more specifics about exactly what it's for and how it's paid and all that good stuff. So,
okay. And then there is a request for Joycelyn to go over the creditable compensation change again regarding certification qualifications and who the authorizer is on that. Joycelyn, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, sure. So this is just to be clear that the CTC does, in some cases, leave it to employers to decide other types of licensure, certification, or credentialing. So this might be most applicable maybe to some folks in the health professions, or kind of those fields where maybe the Department of Public Health or Healthcare Services or one of the boards under Consumer Affairs has the licensing responsibility for people in that field. So the CTC, has credentials for school nurses, psychologists, doctors, things like that, and they may have them for other types of fields, but there are also other ways that doctors and nurses can be certified. And so this is just saying if they are certified, if the CTC does have certification qualifications that they authorize, but that they don't actually put out or regulate, then those two are basic qualifications that would qualify someone for performing creditable service.
Hopefully that answers your question. If you have more specific questions on that issue, you can definitely send in an email and we'll try and address those. But barring any additional questions, we'd like to thank you for attending and be on the lookout for opportunities for feedback for this particular meeting and into the agenda for next time.
Yep, August 5th. So, and again, I wanted to just say thanks. We appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. If there, again, going forward as we look to August 5th and planning that agenda, if there's a specific time of day, if we need to go later in the afternoon or, immediately following CalPERS with a smaller lunch break, please let us know. Again, open to what will work best for you guys. And Kim, I just wanted to say, hey, thank you for joining me today. I know you're usually in the back of the room, so I appreciate you joining me in the front of the room and look forward to doing this again in August.
Yeah, we'll see you guys in August. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.